should be protected and the child has had those injuries, it does motivate you, doesn't it?
Oh, it has to. And you've got a set of skills, and you want to use those skills, and you're proud to have those skills. And we've spoken about how we get to being a homicide investigator. Yeah. By the time we're doing this, I am a homicide investigator, and I'm proud to be that. So you've got these skills, but you've still got a certain amount of humanity of yourself.
Yeah.
But you've got to try and that's the difficult part of that job. You've got to harness that, but also just push it aside a bit, because you've got a job to do.
Yeah.
You're not there to feel sorry for the people. You're not there to... You do, and it's horrible and it's confronting, but you've got to try and harness that, put it away somewhere in a spare room. And eventually, I think your spare room gets full and it falls out into the good room and people get to see where you're at. But that's how it makes you function. That's what drives you, though, and that's.
I think anyone that's and I call it, and it's not putting too high a word on it, but a true detective, a homicide detective, you're going to pay a price. You can't go through that without paying a price, because it's not a 9 to 5 job.
No, and it's a price that you pay that you will always. There's no coming back from it. You can't unsee. And as I've spoken about before, it's not just people will say to you in the street, "Oh, you're a homicide investigator," you know, friends at parties or wherever. Yeah. You're a homicide investigator. You must have seen horrible things. But I think they're just looking at that so superficially about how the graphics of a dead body or a deceased body, or how it's been, how that homicide has occurred. But it's more. It's also the humanity side of things. It gets deeper than that. What people do and how they get there, and what people do it and why they do it is the true confronting way. If you have any emotional understanding of yourself at all, it can never be replaced or fixed entirely.
A couple of other investigations I know has had an impact. Barbara Saunders. Now, Barbara Saunders, this would have been 2001, a housewife that had gone Christmas shopping in the city, in Sydney, in the CBD. It was a couple of weeks out from Christmas, and she was coming back with her Christmas shopping, got off the train on Normanhurst, northern suburbs of Sydney, and was walking 5 minutes to home, and she was shot and killed. You remember that one?
I remember. It was our first, you as team leader, that was our first big job as well, I believe, apart from obviously we were working on Encapsulate, but that shocked me in a lot of different ways. And it sort of taught me about sliding door moments in investigations, and how important and how little things just change as they go along, and led to the horrific death of your and my mum walking home after being Christmas shopping. We spoke, obviously everyone's a suspect.
Yep.
Keith Saunders, being Barbara's husband.
He was an amazing man.
Amazing man, but he turned up to the scene, remember? He was quite bewildered. He was looking for his wife.
And like when we say turn up to the scene, again, to put that in perspective, I think we're called out on a Friday afternoon, and so we're at the scene
at the crime scene.
On the Friday night.
Well, a couple of hundred metres away from Normanhurst railway station where the shooting had occurred. Yeah. So he'd just naturally gone down, we know now, to look where his wife, why she hadn't come home. Obviously, I was given the job to find out where Keith's whereabouts were, and I'd investigated him and interviewed him with quite passion and vigour, with a certain direction to see where he was at. As I said, we don't leave a stone unturned. He taught me something about that, and then you went on to, obviously Keith wasn't involved in any way, shape or form in the murder of Barbara, and was clearly not even suspected long after what we did on that first evening of just speaking with him and interviewing. But you end up with a great rapport with Keith, but that rapport, he found that he trusted us because he knew that we didn't care, who was involved.
What happened there, like what you're talking about with Keith, is that we did go hard on him, and we make no apologies. We're investigating the murder, and we went hard on him. Now, going hard on him, and people might form their own views on that. It's all within the parameters in which we can work, but we can make things uncomfortable for people, and we deliberately made things uncomfortable for.
And you have to be able
for Keith. And I remember when we found the person responsible for the murder, I spoke to Keith and I apologised to him about the way that we treated him, and I think he said, and I know this is what we've discussed, and it was something that I carried for a long time, that he said that he was happy the way that we went after him because he knew then that the right people were looking out for the murder of his wife. And
Exactly right.
I've carried that all through my career, and I tell young detectives that we're homicide detectives. People want us to do our job. Our job is to find the killer. And someone like Keith, and I've learned so much from victims, and I know you do, because we see them at the worst time in their life. There couldn't be a worse set of circumstances. A loved one has been killed, and some of the courage and the character that they show to overcome that, it inspires me.
It inspired me. It also, it's an indicator to me, our relationship with Keith Saunders and the whole process of that murder of Barbara. As we've spoken about before, Nicholas Grayson was charged with the murder. He actually pleaded guilty, which is quite surreal. It doesn't happen a lot to a murder. That's how well the investigation went. We then got to the sentencing, and if you remember, I think Grayson, I could be completely, I don't think I'm too far wrong, but he got 15 on the top, which is a non-parole period, a full sentence period, and 12 years on the what we call on the bottom, which is a non-parole period. Realistically, he could only serve, possibly he was 19 at the time he committed the murders, and he could have been out by the time he was 31, so to speak.
Be out now?
Yeah, he'd be way out by now. He and Keith, the brother, was upset. He was comforting Keith in the courtroom. And we come out the front, and I'm not sure if you recall the time, but we actually apologised. We said we're so sorry that we felt ourselves that the sentence was a bit light for someone taking away someone's life and their mother and his wife, his lifelong partner. He just looked with a sort of a steely glaze and said, "It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter what years he gets. Nothing's bringing Barbara back." That's when it's resonated with me. That challenged my own personal goals. But are you doing good, or are we just filling a void?
That's the quality of the character that Keith was. I thought that the way he demonstrated, the way he dealt with such adversity, I thought it was inspirational. Moving on from those ones, another job that we can have a laugh, have a cry, all sorts of things with this one, because it was certainly full on. The Terry Falconer case was a once-in-a-career type of investigation. Jason was with me on that investigation for the hard initial slog. Terry was a prisoner and career criminal. He was abducted by 3 people purporting to be police officers. They arrested him and bundled him into a car. They tortured him and then dismembered him. His body parts were found in 7 bags floating in the Hastings River at Port Macquarie. Terry was a criminal informant. The suspect list was like the who's who of the New South Wales underworld. Jason, myself and a small group of detectives jumped into the investigation with vengeance. We stirred up the underworld and bikies until we got a result 10 years later. They were exciting times and dangerous. We were running criminal informants and the stakes were high. Jason's gift of the gab came in handy throughout. He had the ability to communicate with crooks and extract information from them that they were reluctant to pass on. The murder of Terry Falconer. Terry Falconer was a prisoner. He was a long-term prisoner. He was a drug manufacturer and had lived basically a life of crime. But again, we talk about victims. We've got to talk about he was loved, and there was people that loved him, his sons and his daughter, his wife. He was abducted whilst on day release by 3 people purporting to be police officers in western suburbs in Sydney, and his body turned up dismembered in 7 bags weighted down with rocks in the Hastings River up at Port Macquarie. We were called on to that job. Remember, there was a time, who was it that pleaded guilty? Oh, it was the Barbara Saunders matter. When we got the plea guilty, we had some time available, and I said to you and Nigel, and we might talk about Nigel in a sec.
We do need to talk about Nigel.
do need to talk about
Lots
Nigel.
of people need to talk about Nigel.
That I said to you guys, look, there's this murder up on the mid-north coast. It looks like an interesting one. It's a prisoner that's been abducted and cut up. Do you want to do it? And all 3 of us said, yeah, let's go for it.
Remember you said, you also, during that talk or briefing with us, with your team, you said, okay, Evers, how do we get inspiration out of this one? And I said, well, although he's not particularly the most lovable human being on the planet, Terence Falconer, in the sense of his convicted crimes and things and what he'd done. I said, I don't know, there's a whole lot of crooks involved in this, there's got to be. And in this homicide case, obviously we're still working for the family and things like that, but for once we were just, okay, there's crime here, there's a whole lot of crime, and not just the murder itself. I just had that feel from the start.
As an opportunity of creating mayhem in the criminal world.
Yeah, it's good word, good word. Yeah, and it did drive us that way.
And the mayhem resulted in, I think it was 14 people charged with over 140 criminal charges ranging from murder, kidnapping, you name it, they were charged with it, and that was the end result of that investigation. But it was confronting for us, but a lot of travel, a lot of time away from home. On travel, I think we went out west a fair bit.
We did. We had some interesting times.
Yeah, and I'm still a bit cranky about that. Now, you've got your perspective on it, I've got my perspective.
Well, I know this is your show, Gary, and you're apparently the star.
No, we're all equal, Jason.
No, we're not. Let's not face it. But this story is mine.
Okay, I'll let you have it.
We are at a stage where we're very tired. Anyone that's
when
driven,
you say we, you're talking you and I.
You and I. We've driven a lot. Well, I've driven a lot. You sat in the passenger seat a lot, which used to shit me, and still does to this day.
Helps if you talk about it.
You purposely drove like driving Miss Daisy, so I reckon that you didn't have to.
I obey rules.
You obey rules. What was your line? What if everyone did that? Especially when I'd park illegally. What if everyone did that? Oh, I said, well, then there'd be illegal parking for me and all the other people can get the ticket. Can we move on? But we're in the middle between Byrne and Walgett, dealing with informants. It is quiet
and peaceful.
Now, I've dealt with Gary moving hotel rooms around, chugunging, standing on his head, having 3 a.m. baths because, I don't know, his core body temp was up a point or something. I don't fucking know. But I'm not a doctor and nor am I a psychiatrist.
Can we cut?
No, we can't cut. This cut me. Anyway, so he's finally having a drive. Now, out west, yes, the speed limits are still 110, but you can push them a little bit. Even a rule-abiding driver like Gary, you could possibly get it up to 115 and maybe not get yourself in too much trouble, as the rest of the locals probably drive at about 180. He stops the car and just, without a word, just wanders off out into the paddock. It's barren.
Quiet, peaceful.
Oh, it was
paddock.
quiet. I'm sitting in the passenger seat, I look up and I see this dickhead over in the paddock. And I wind the window down, or press the button down, lean over the driver's side, and swearing's allowed, isn't it?
I think so.
Yeah. I said, what the fuck are you doing? And he said, shh, I'm listening to the silence. It was the trigger. It was just the proverbial straw that broke the camel's back. I fucking snapped. I know he's my senior partner, he's my team leader, but I've had a fucking enough. I said, I don't care if Daddy didn't take you fucking camping. I don't care what happened to you in your childhood. I don't care whether you got a bat or a bowl or cricket enough. I just want you to get the fuck back in the car, drive like a normal fucking person so we can get to the town and I can get the fuck away from you for a bit.
Jason, your anger's coming through.
Oh, sorry.
That's perhaps why...
Consume me a little bit, Gary,
perhaps
sorry.
why it would have benefited you to come out and listen to the silence. You should try it sometime.
You've got daddy issues.
Just, we're not going to bring my father up. That's unfair.
Oh, that is unfair.
Okay.
Sorry.
Just on that, you mentioned hotel rooms.
Did you get back in the car and drive that?
Yes, I did get back in the car.
And did you do as you were told?
Yes, because you put
Thank you. I just want that on the record.
You put the police sirens on, and it's hard to meditate when the sirens are blaring in the background.
And I thought it might help you break the law and go a little bit quicker. If the sirens are on, we can break the law.
Talk about the motel rooms?
Yes.
But I just want to clarify this because it sounds a bit strange when you talk about all the time we spend in the motel rooms. But
we're both too cheap to get separate rooms, so we'd always share. We were using our travelling allowance appropriately as per the award.
What people don't understand that when you work on a team in a detective's thing, and I think that's probably why they make a lot of TV series and all that, the rapport that you've got to have, because basically it's 24/7 that you're living with this person. So just picture Jason and I.
It's a marriage.
Driving for half a day, working for a full day, then we go and we check into some cheap hotel and the beds are about 6 inches apart, and we'd have to move the motel room around and we put the wardrobe in between us so we could just try and get away from each other. Because that is...
That's right.
It's true.
I can still see you doing it. That's why I'm laughing. Is that loud?
God,
Fucking
I
idiot.
just needed a break from you. And we got stuck in some towns.
You and many others, Gary.
Stuck in some towns. But look, we mentioned Nigel.
Guy or in-house movies.
Yeah, that's a story for another time.
Oh, sorry.
So that sounds weird, but it wasn't weird. It was just strange. With Nigel, the homicide team, and this is what people probably don't understand. I talk New South Wales, but it refers to other states as well, and pretty well across the country. You'll have a defined team that go out and respond to it. So our core team in New South Wales, the homicide team's made up of an inspector, 3 sergeants, and probably 6, 8 constables. So in essence, a sergeant and 2 constables run a team. A murder happens and we'll respond. So there was Jason and myself. When I was promoted to sergeant, I had to form a team. Jason was at homicide as a senior constable. Jason's got a set of skills. I've got a set of skills, but we weren't real good on the computer system. So how did Nigel become
So
part
cut
of our
it
team?
short, Gary. We needed ourselves a nerd and we needed it quick.
What was the first job I gave you on the team? I said, Jason, go through the roster, find someone that knows computers.
So I skimmed down and there it is, staring me in the face. Nigel.
Yeah.
Nigel Warren. That's got to be a fucking nerd. Nigel.
So-
Who calls that kid Nigel?
So-
Sorry to anyone from Nigels for children.
So we got Nigel on the team, and you have different stages in your career, but that was one of the happiest times I've had. We had a lot of fun and we did a lot of
He
good
was the
work.
cliche Nigel though,
Yeah,
because he
yeah.
loved computers. He loved
loved
playing.
computers,
He was
and
a
he
very
saved
good
us.
investigator, Nigel.
The Barbara Saunders one, they brought in that new computer system.
Yeah.
We'd still be at Hornsby now if we didn't have
Fighting.
Nigel, because we weren't sure how to use
Why
it.
wouldn't the printer talk to the computer? I don't know what
But
happens.
look, I know you're, and just lightening up a little bit, I know you're proud of your nudity. You do have...
How could I not be, Gary? This is being recorded, isn't it?
You have any excuse to get your clothes off, but one time in particular, when we're on the Gold Coast, and there was Nigel, yourself, Luke Rankin, and we're away on a trip, and I think it was the Terry Falconer job.
It was.
And we had a lot of work to do, and I was worried
We
that
did.
you guys were getting distracted by the bright lights and the beaches.
Luke and I especially.
Exactly. And
Good looking bloke, Luke.
said that we're going to have a briefing, and when travelling detectives, we don't always work, especially in other states, we don't work out of the police station, we'll work out of the motel room. So we set the motel room up as a briefing room or an incident room or whatever. And I said, okay, at 2 o'clock we're going to have a briefing, I've got to sort some stuff out. You knew it was coming, I wanted more work out of you guys. So how did you respond to that?
I thought now was as good a time as any. There's a thing called a duty book, which is a recording of what you do during your day as an investigator. I thought now was as good a time as any, especially with a glass top table, that perhaps we disrobe and do our duty books in the nude, just to bring around my style of how I thought our next meeting should go. It was sort of a bit of a quick way, a nude artistic way of saying fuck you, Gary. Although a bit nervous at first, but me being the lead senior constable at the time felt I should disrobe. So I started and they thought, hey, this, it became quite invigorating. Anyway, Gary came out with his arm up in the air, poised
Dressed
with
in my
wisdom,
suit.
dressed in his suit, tie on, immaculately dressed, and we're just staring nude, writing in our duty books. With a glass top table for people,
For a visual effect.
for a visual effect.
Now, look, and it's true, and that happened, and it is...
Did you get a word out, Gary?
It is very hard to get angry at 3 naked men doing their duty books on a glass table.
Were we not conducting our duties, Gary, as you asked us
Technically,
to do?
you were abiding by what I'd asked you to do,
Yes.
update your duty books. One other thing. Now, I know you've taken great joy in my current situation where there's accusations apparently that I'm a bully.
Bully.
And
I might have sent you a few texts.
There was
explaining that.
there was one time that you were late for work, and your partner at the time decided that look, I'll ring Gary and just explain.
Yeah.
Could you want to talk me through that?
Yes, well, I was living, I think it was in a house, underneath a house of some other people. Anyway, I had some borrowed items at the time, one of them being my alarm clock, which didn't particularly work overly well, which I woke up to it not going off, me going, oh fuck, I'm running late, this lunatic's going to go off his chops.
That's me.
That's you. You're the lunatic. So I asked my partner, who also had known Gary through personal relationships.
She went out with my brother.
Shut
for 8
up,
years.
Gary. We said we wouldn't talk about it anymore. She's the mother of my children. Don't mention your brother. Anyway, I said, dear Rebecca, could you please ring Gary while I'm showering to say that I'm running 10 minutes late and just apologise. She recalls a conversation that she rang you and said, Jason's very sorry, Gary. Good morning. She was very polite on the phone. She had good phone manner, Rebecca. There was no need to be angry at her. Good morning, Gary. Just letting you know that Jason's just asked me to give you a call just to say he's running 10 minutes late. The alarm clock had a misfunction, didn't work. Gary's response was silence for about 30 seconds. He said, alarm clocks don't make mistakes, Rebecca. People do. That's what I was working with. That might explain to you how I then branch out into nude Judy books. The intensity was good, but sometimes it just needed, the pressure valve just needed a little, just needed a little bit
Someone
out.
needed to keep you under control.
I was a little bit rogue at times.
A couple of other jobs that talk about. I know that we put a lot of effort into, and it's one that hasn't been resolved. But it was one that we were brought on to after our expertise in reinvestigating the Barraville murders. We were asked if we wanted to go on a investigation. It was led by Paul Jacob, and Paul Jacob was my mentor. He trained me with utmost respect, and for the work that the way he mentored me in as the role of a homicide detective. And it was the death of Carolyn Byrne. What's your take on that investigation?
Yeah, it was.
I just should clarify for those that don't know. Carolyn Byrne was a model that was found at the base of the Gap.
Which is a famous or infamous suicide spot of Sydney.
And there was a lot of other players that were well known in the media that were associated with Caroline. Her boyfriend at the time was Gordon Wood, who was Rene Rivkin's chauffeur. And it was certainly one that captured the imagination of the public in Sydney.
Yeah, and rightfully so. As I might have mentioned, it led to, unfortunately, a set of circumstances led to that Carolyn's body was not given an autopsy or a post-mortem examination due to the fact that they felt that it was a suicide at that original time, which eventually led to the changes of that all, unless there was a death certificate, detectives have to attend and examine all deceased bodies. That was a coronial direction in the end, and adopted by the New South Wales Police. It was, it's funny because we'd done the ANCUT and we were still continuing to do the Strikeforce ANCUT reinvestigation, that they then felt that we had a set of skills that we knew how to go about a reinvestigation and do it properly. So I felt quite proud to be brought onto it. Obviously, in awe, I can't believe I'm going to say this out loud, but I really enjoyed working with you. Oh God, that hurt.
Say it again, Jason.
It's nearly burnt coming out my throat. Yeah, just throat. Has someone got a lozenge?
Sorry, do you want to grab that one again? Just grab the mic.
Oh, sorry.
He did that deliberately.
I did that.
It's all right.
I cut it off so he didn't have to
It's
hear
all right.
that.
I'm recording this anyway.
Okay, I enjoyed working with you, Gary, and to work with Paul Jacob in that sense too was great. This was building into a massive case. It was famous. There was people, June Daly Watkins, who Carolyn had worked with.
Yeah. It was
a model. It was an interesting case. It was. It had social setting. It had underlying rumours to it. It had all sorts of different things. But it was
just on that. That's I think that's the beauty of doing the work that we do now. Whether it's a homicide detective or a detective, you really get to look into people's lives, don't you? And it's something that I
loved that part of being a homicide investigator, Gaz. I really did. It was great. Your best witness is gone, and unfortunately so. But then you put it together.
Each crime has its different thing, doesn't it? Like we were looking into a world that we hadn't seen before with the international models and that.
Well, looking at you, you'd never be involved in the world of models. But anyway, we move on.
We've got photos of you, Jason. You've also got the organised crime with the Terry Falconer investigation. That did result in the Underbelly TV series.
Well, and we lived with an informant who.
I think the public are very interested in informants, and there's certain things we can and can't say. But between you and I, we've had some, let's call them Mr. X and Mr. Y.
Mr. X is my favourite.
We did, and I think we can say this, but one time we were going to a location that was out in a farmyard. We were a little bit nervous about seeing Mr. X.
Yeah.
He had a certain reputation for a crime that he may have committed with a chainsaw.
Yes.
And when we pulled up, our guns
Which
were...
involved dismembering that person, was the alleged story.
Our guns were behind us in the bag, and we were going to put our guns on when we pulled into the driveway. And we pulled up and we didn't have time to get our guns, and what did he do?
Well, we didn't have time to get our guns because he approached us with a running chainsaw. And he wasn't in a particularly good mood. His moods would go up and down. We called him our son, didn't we? And we fought whether we were mum or dad at times. But yeah, mum and dad were scared of their teenage son that day. And I thought we were going to die,
He
Gary.
thought it was hilarious that he turned about 6'4" with a chainsaw, walking at us with this strange look in his eye.
It's got, like, there's piercings, there's tattoos, it's the cliche gangster, horrible, scary.
But I think the public don't understand, and again, we can't go into specifics because their lives are at risk, but the amount of time that we spend with informants, and that one in particular, remember we got some information, I can't say too much, but got some information. We phoned people that were going to potentially look after him, and their words were, get him out now.
Yeah.
And we did, and they were going to take him over the next day. But
Particular
in fact,
section of the New South Wales Police who were apparently in charge of looking after people like this for us.
but we ended up looking after him for 6 weeks to the fact that he was wearing our clothes. Yeah.
Well, my clothes.
Yeah, well,
Because he was broader, Gary.
was
Your
fat.
clothes, he couldn't have got them on you. We had to go to my clothes, a more muscular, solid, manly type build.
I don't know where to take that. All right. See, homicide does affect people.
Yeah, it does. It makes you disproportionate in your own self-beliefs.
Look, there's another thing about you that I think you've got a unique perspective on the work of a detective, in that you've been on the other end of a crime, that you've been a victim of a fairly violent crime.
Yeah.
And that's certainly, I know it's had an effect on you and given you a perspective on things from a victim's point of view. Do you want to tell us about that?
It was mid-90s. I was a plainclothes constable. I was working as a detective. I'd taken on my first mortgage. I'm just setting the scene here for it. And for reasons being that the time, God love the banks, they were about 16-17% back at those days.
Jason, you're drifting.
I'm drifting. God, banks, just give me a break. Oh,
I don't think people are really interested in. We've got an
But
audience.
I had a second job, is where I was leading to, Gary, which was
What were the mortgage rates?
about 16-17%.
Is that really relevant to the story?
Well, it forced me into a second job, which forced me into this situation.
Well, you've tied then.
Yeah. So I was working at a golf club, and I was working a particular evening when the cleaners were coming in. We were just fixing up the tills and getting ready to finish when the cleaner were a husband and wife. She was in the main office, general office, and she screamed. And I looked over at the husband, and he said, "Oh, she's probably seen a mouse." But I went on and I said, it was just that sixth sense. And I said, I didn't like the sounds of that. And I went to walk in just to see what was happening with her. I walked into a sawn-off shotgun and got pointed straight into my head. And he said, "Get in the fucking ground." I said, "Mate," I went into cop mode. I didn't know what to do. I said, "Mate, you're in charge. No dramas here. There's no dramas here." And I put my hands up. I purposely didn't try and look at him, as one, the gun was stopping me from doing that. But I hit the ground, and I just said to him, which was silly when I look back at it. I said, "Mate, just so you know, there's a lady out there and there's a man just having a staff drink. They mean you no harm either." Anyway, he ordered them in. The girl came in, she was very scared. She had the safe combination, I didn't have it. She said, "What do you do?" He's telling me to fucking shut up. I said, "Just open the safe, give him, it's not our money, just give him the money." She did that. He walked out the room. He had to leave the main office room. He come back and he put the sawn-off shotgun to my head, and I heard the rustling. I'm just chewing concrete at this stage, thinking he's going to pull the trigger. I thought this is this is me done, and I'm fucking helpless here. I'm done. And I had my badge in my pocket, and I thought, well, if he goes into my wallet or just decides to take that, I'm fucking dead. He didn't. I laid still. I didn't panic. I didn't react. He eventually left. A week later, he did another arm hold up, and he shot the person in that and killed them, the person he attended. So yeah, my feelings were, I knew how it felt to be a victim from a personal point of view, and I didn't like pricks being able to do that to people and take away that feeling from people. And I just always thought he didn't pull the trigger for whatever reason that day. You know, grace of God go I, all those cliches come with it. But I felt that the homicide victims that we dealt with and things didn't get the same opportunity I did. And
that's very
if
telling.
I could make it that at least those pricks were found, or at least give their family some closure that my family wouldn't have got if I'd been shot.
It does give a very interesting perspective on it, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Jason, you talked about the Carolyn Byrne investigation, and it certainly was an interesting one, and it showed us different sides of the world that we hadn't seen before. Mm-hmm. It also got us on a trip to London. Just a side note here, I should say Gordon Wood has been acquitted of charges regarding the case of his girlfriend Carolyn Byrne, who was found deceased at the notorious Sydney suicide spot, The Gap. I think it's important the audience understand that. Do you want to talk about... well, first of all, let's talk about the serious side of the trip to London. We went over to London to interview Gordon Wood.
We did.
He'd left the country a couple of years before that, and...
Yeah, I think due to he felt perceived treatment and dispersions thrown on him, he was still free to leave at that stage, and he felt that a life was better in the UK, I think was his words.
It was such a high-profile job, and we sold it to the bosses that you send us to over to London and we'll be able to interview Gordon Wood.
We did, and put ourselves a fair bit under pressure there, because the New South Wales Police loves to spend that sort of money on their investigators travelling. No, Gary, don't bring that up. Leave that scab healed.
I thought you had let that go.
You know I'm a pilot, Gary, and you stole my time.
You're starting to sound really strange now, Jason. Everyone here knows you're not a pilot. You think you're a pilot, but you're not.
It was my time in the cockpit and you stole it.
We were, I think before we went to London, we were on the Jaden March murder investigation.
Yeah, we were.
We're right in the thick of that. So we didn't have the time to prepare for the interview. But we had our analysts, and what people don't realise is the behind-the-scenes work for homicide investigations. We had our analyst, Bianca Commoner, who's probably the most valuable employee of the New South Wales Police with the work that she does. She prepared a file for us before we went to London to interview Gordon. Now, in fairness to Gordon, he's no dope. We knew it was going to be a difficult interview, so we had to prepare. And the flight to London's about 24 hours. And what do we do on the flight?
We prepared. We worked. We prepared. I don't remember even watching movies. I think we actually worked the whole way over.
We worked the whole way over.
Yeah, it was exhausting, but well worth the journey. Obviously, people were interested in what we're doing, and that led you, obviously, the pilot inviting you up to the cockpit.
Are you still bitter about that?
He was really looking for me. He would have been shocked when he saw you pull in, because he would have known I know a bit about planes and know how to handle myself around a cockpit.
Let's make sure we set the record straight on what happened there. Jason does think he's a pilot. He's not actually a pilot, but everyone's got a fantasy. I think I'm an astronaut, but we all know I'm not an astronaut. But Jason
You've got a bald head like a helmet's on.
Anyway. That's good, but nasty. I don't know how to come back from that. The crew that got on at Singapore...
That's right, yeah.
The crew that got on at Singapore had knew me from 3 weeks or 4 weeks before.
That's how it happened.
Because I had taken a prisoner with Pam back to Paris.
Pam Young.
Pam Young. And Pam Young's another detective inspector in Homicide. And part of the job that Jason, myself and a few others at Homicide also did was transport prisoners around the world. And it was usually on short notice. But I'd taken the prisoner over to with Pam Young and escorted the prisoner across to Paris, and he misbehaved the whole flight. So I was wrestling with him and fighting with him on the plane all the way. And the cabin crew remembered me from that flight 3 weeks earlier.
In his defence, if I had to sit next to you too for 24 hours, I'd be blowing up. I'd be whinging and carrying on like a stuck pig if I was next to you. I'd rather just go with an army person or something.
Anyway, what happened was we went to, the pilot invited me up to the cockpit, and Jason was very angry. And then, because it was Heathrow Airport, the flights were banking up. So I spent 2 hours up with the pilot while we're circling around London. He's pointing out all the sights to me, and I was up in the cockpit when we landed, and Jason was very cranky after that.
You're an arsehole, Gary.
But
a thieving arsehole.
First, that's not very nice.
No.
First night in London, and this is, I think it's important the public understand what we actually do to prepare for an interview. We don't just walk into an interview room and just go, right, we've got a list of questions. We need to know more about the investigation than anyone. We need to know it so we can drop it at a moment's notice, questions that we want to ask. So,
And we arm wrestle.
That was another.
I won.
I will get to that.
Sorry.
The story in London. So our first night in London, it was a heat wave in London. Everyone was out, everyone was partying, and Jason and I arrived there, and we both wanted to go out and experience the nightlife of London, but we in fact sat up all night, even after the 24-hour flight, sat up all night preparing for the interview with Gordon Wood. And I still, to this day, as much fun as we gave up by not going out that night, and we fought during the night at about 3 o'clock in the morning, you were really starting to annoy me. The preparation we got for that interview, and we sat down and did an interview. But remember where we found Gordon when we were in London looking for him?
It was near the Chelsea football ground, wasn't it?
Yeah. We went there with Scotland Yard. I forget his name.
And I saw Paul Rifle, the cricketer, and I was distracted. You were trying to find Gordon. I said,
almost-
that's Paul Rifle, the Australian cricketer.
We
He's now a very good umpire.
We almost lost Gordon because Jason was looking for famous people.
I get a bit starstruck. I'm human.
What about when he came in to the interview room? Remember?
He turned into an English dapper lad, hadn't he? And he turned up with coffee and muffins.
Yeah.
Which, all right, I'll have to say it. I was proud of you. All right, I said it. It's out there. I was proud of you because you threw them in the bin and said, all right, now we're here to talk to you about the death of Carolyn Byrne.
Well,
and I like the way you approached it. And
6
hours later, or around 6 hours later, we finished. And that was a gruelling interview. And
it was exhausting, wasn't it?
Credit where it's due. You did an amazing job.
Well, look, I think
I wasn't a bad second hand, but anyway, you don't have to say.
I was about to say it. You jumped in, but I think that's what the public have got to understand, that the work that police do, and there's a lot of pressure when you're interviewing someone like that.
Well, you've got to look at the contingencies too, Gaz. Like, what if we get over to London? We're investigating a potential murder, a suspicious death that happened in the Rocks, Rose Bay, whatever the Gap's, Watson's Bay. If he confesses. If he just comes out and says, OK, I've done this. What if he says, like, we even looked at whether they made a group suicide pact and he pulled out? Like, anything. You've got to look at and have your mind open to wherever that interview may go.
Yeah. And it was exhausting, but I'm proud of the interview that we did, and we know that Gordon was convicted of murder, but he's now a free man. The Court of Criminal Appeal overturned that conviction. I'm not going to comment on that, but I know that the work that we did, and Tony Byrne, I still see Tony Byrne around, and he's thankful for the work, and that's something with Homicide I think is important. You've experienced it, the thanks and the reward that you get from families.
Yeah, it's an unfortunate, it's a forced bond, but I think they actually grow to respect that bond. It's sort of a nexus to the loved ones that they've lost, I guess, to a certain extent. And generally, my perception and my conclusion is that they're generally respectful of what we've done in regards to the treating, and that's so important in any recovery process with a horrible trauma like a homicide does to the people left behind and their families.
It certainly makes a bond that you share, because you've gone through the pain, and the person they're looking to help them through that is invariably the people investigating the crime. But the London trip was interesting. There's some that I think we could talk about. Other aspects of London we possibly can't. We did manage to find ourselves in Buckingham Palace, which was quite unusual for
With a
two
Gurkha.
detectives, with a Gurkha. Scotland Yard gave us a Nepalese, ex-Nepalese soldier, a Gurkha, to look after us. And the actual sergeant from Scotland Yard said he doesn't know how to deal with this person. He's a little bit scary. But remember his words to us that he said, nothing will happen to you while you've got the Gurkha looking after you. And in fact, he walked us through Hyde Park and was telling us what berries we could eat if we got lost in Hyde Park. He was a very intense character.
And that's big coming from you, who's one very intense character. He was an intense character.
And
I remember he stayed with us to the wee hours if we were...
Well, he actually said if someone insults you or hurts you, I will kill them. And I think he was
That is
serious.
my job.
But that is the fun and the joy of travelling.
He just
and
didn't
the work
expect
that we did.
you and I to be insulting
No.
each other. He got to be confused in who he was meant to kill and keep alive at that stage.
But I was impressed when we're standing out at Buckingham Palace with hundreds and hundreds of other tourists looking into Buckingham Palace, and he said, "Do you want to go in?" And we said yes. And he walked up to the Beefeater Guard.
Yeah.
They opened the gates for us, and we walked into Buckingham Palace.
And we
on
went
our
in.
own.
Yes.
Sat there and watched the passing parade. So.
Couple of good-looking roosters like us in a town like London, surely they want to give us a bit of special treatment.
Well, that's your opinion, Jason. But anyway. I found out Jason had decided to leave the cops a couple of years after we had stopped working together. He had been promoted to Detective Sergeant and was working out of Balliner's Detective's office. I was sad to hear Jason had decided to leave, but as I said to him, he'd done his bit and there was no shame in putting up his hand and saying he had had enough. Jason had paid the price for caring. He took the responsibility of catching killers seriously and he was very good at his job. Jason was my longest partner I had in the cops, and as much as it pains me to say this, he was also my best partner. Just a few other things in regards to the policing side of it and the different experiences you get. That's something that's amazed me in the time that I've spent as a detective, but the homicide detective and the type of experiences. What's your thoughts reflecting 10 years as a homicide detective? You look back at things and would you change it? Like if you had the time again?
I think it's too intense to look back and say, could I change it? Obviously, I felt I made mistakes at times. I obviously felt that sometimes you could do something better. Obviously, you learn from every experience, but that's life in general. But the homicide investigator, you can't dwell on that. You've got to move forward. It's intense. I'm probably sad I left it at the time I did. I probably was. I was just coming in at that detective sergeant level, and I was starting to, we'd branched off. You'd gone into inspector level, and I didn't fulfil everything I wanted to do by running some of the cases myself as much as like the long-term cases that we did together. But it takes a bit of your soul, I guess. It takes a bit each time. The longer you're there, and I just thought my time was done when I left. But it's been a big part of my life.
Yeah.
One that was very rewarding. Had some great experiences. Learnt a lot about people. But I think from where my general policing career started, I think I generally helped some people, so I can walk away feeling proud about that.
We should be proud of it. You lived and breathed the role of a detective and put in and paid the price. I always say that if you're going to work in homicide, you've got to be prepared to bleed for the case. And people think that's a bit dramatic or a bit over the top, but it's not. It's really, and you did walk those steps. You left the police after 20 years.
That's correct. Yep.
Your choice. You just decided that you had enough.
Yeah.
We were talking the other day, and you raised something that was sort of you thought was the tipping point, or something that was fairly dramatic and coupled with everything else. Do you want to talk about that?
Yeah. It was obviously a massive decision to leave the police for me personally. But I felt that it was time for me to maybe concentrate on some other things and just maybe concentrate on family and see the world in a different light. Let's put it that way. It was just prior to me finishing that. Actually, it was horrible day, and unfortunately Ballina's become quite infamous now for its shark attacks, but this was the first one. And I went down to the beach, and it got eerily dark, and it's a beautiful place, Ballina.
Yeah.
It has beautiful waters, but it was dark and stormy, and these poor kids, there'd been a teacher's strike of all things, and these kids went and caught the bus down from Olstonville, which is just inland of Ballina, up on the plateau, and unfortunately bull sharks in the dark, stormy waters like that bite first and ask questions later, and he unfortunately took the main part of the young 16-year-old's leg, and he bled out there on the beach, and I was one of the first on scene. It rained, but I've been to so many scenes, and we've spoken
When
about
you
that.
say he bled out, he died.
He died, yeah.
Yeah.
He died. A 16-year-old died from the shark bite. I've been to seen so many deaths in so many different ways and dealt with it. And two things stood out to me here. One, it rained while I was there. I was in a suit, so my home was close by to.
Yeah.
So I went home and got changed, and I saw my wife, and I said, and she said, "You look a bit pasty," and I said, "I'm just having one of those days." She said, and I was quite distant, nothing with the relationship, I was quite distant. She said, what's going on with you? And I said, well, that's the only way I hadn't seen someone die. And that, and then the impact that the families had on me as well, I just felt that my time was done. And when you've stopped that caring, and yet what we spoke about as a homicide investigator and things like that, you can't then pair it off.
Yeah.
You lose a certain quality of the skills that you need, and that's where my descent down into being mild-mannered Jason and not super Jason. Sorry, I'm not Superman. I just want the kids to hear that.
You're still a drop kick. All right. Speaking of drop kicks, I'll probably regret asking this question, but it's got me curious. You watch TV, fictional detectives, books, movies.
They're
that
everywhere,
type of
Gary.
thing. Who do you think would really encapsulate the type of person you are to play you?
Whoa. I've actually thought about this a lot. Remember we used to joke about it, and I always said Denzel Washington, and you looked at me strangely. I don't know why.
No, neither
Apart
do
from me being a white Caucasian male. I don't know. I think a little mixture, Gary, a little mixture could work it out. I think Denzel Washington, I liked the way Denzel, apart from his corrupt and horrible ways in Training Day, the way he went about business, I could see a little bit of...
The intensity.
Yeah, the intensity. He knew his way around the streets, and he was a bit of a sharpshooter, and that was a bit me.
Reflects well on you.
Reflects well on me, and he was cool, and I'm a cool guy, so that's how that one comes across. I also thought Arnie Schwarzenegger played a massive role, a very deep, hard-hitting role in Kindergarten Cop, and I thought that basically just his physicality that really
a remarkable
he had
similarity.
He had a useless partner at the time who got food sick and just was vomiting in bed, and he was just a big brawn muscle, but he adapted to the situation like all good detectives could, and I think with my muscle and my capabilities of adapting, and also one last, and this might find you a little bit strange, but a bit of Dennis France. He was off NYPD Blue, because I think he, Dennis France, myself and Paul Jacobs, the only ones that can pull off a short-sleeved business shirt and tie, and he did it well, and he looked mean doing it. And so I think a combination of all those, with my massive arms like Arnie's, coming out of a short-sleeved shirt, and I think you've near got the full package of me there, Gary.
So, okay, and for the people who are listening...
I'm sorry, kids.
For the people who are listening to this podcast, if you take away an image, and those that haven't seen the photo of Jason, I think he's described himself well, a combination of Arnold Schwarzenegger, Denzel Washington, and who's the other person?
Dennis France.
Dennis France.
Remember, he was... I forget
remember
his
him.
character's name now.
I can see it all.
Sipowicz.
Sipowicz.
It was Sipowicz, that's him.
Yeah, a combination.
Sipowicz, me and Paul Jacobs.
All
Only
right.
men that should be... Only detectives allowed to wear short-sleeved shirts.
Well, Jason...
You haven't got the arms, Gary.
You don't have to insult people.
Oh, sorry.
It doesn't make you a better person.
That does make me feel a little bit better than at times.
Well, Jason, I was going to say something nice. Thank you very much for coming on the podcast. I really appreciate it. I think you've been very open and honest with the way you've answered. You've entertained people. You've annoyed me, and I know that's your primary goal in life.
That's just a win in itself. Stop, don't give me any more.
I think you've given people a genuine insight into what goes on in the life of a detective, a real detective, and the price that you pay, the funny things that we see and do. And no, thank you for your time, and thanks for the work that you've done for the families that you've supported.
Thank you, Gary, and I wish you well, and you're an amazing person to work with. You did some amazing things. I learnt so much whilst working with you, and you deserve success with this, and you finally get to live out your dream where you record everything that's going on.
I was waiting for the...
Bully, criminal.
I was waiting for the punchline, and can I just clarify and finish this podcast with the alleged allegations?
Oh, sorry, alleged. I
Yeah.
I couldn't even really spell that word, alleged. It's a funny word.
And what's
Why
wrong-
doesn't it have a D?
What's wrong with recording? Thank you very much.
Thanks, guys.
Having got to know Jason as well as anyone, I make these observations about Jason. On the surface, he appears to be happy-go-lucky, always the life of the party. People draw their strength from Jason. That's the public side of Jason, but there is a deeper side to him. He often dwells on things. Most people don't see that side, and that's why I think Homicide has taken its toll. Next time on I Catch Killers, I talk with retired Detective Inspector Dennis O'Toole, who was a mentor of mine. He's worked some of the most high-profile cases in the country, including the Victor Chang murder and the infamous Granny Killer.
Pulled him from the bath, and he was still breathing. We called the paramedics. They attended. We called for the cavalry to come, and next thing the place was swarming and what have you. We had to save him. We wanted to talk to him. He was still alive.
Thank you for listening. See you next time.